woke up with a terrible headache. It took her a moment to realize she was lying in her bed. The party last night had clearly gone a little too far. She slowly got up and opened the curtains in her room. Sunlight filled the dark space. Moving sluggishly, Kim walked to the bathroom and began washing her face. Suddenly, her phone started ringing. She turned and saw it lying on the floor under her bed. "My God, how drunk was I?" she muttered. She picked up the phone. It was Rick. Rick and Kim worked together, and the night before they had been together at a party at a co-worker's house. Kim answered, "Yeah, what's up?" For a moment, she couldn't understand what he was saying. Kim replied in an irritated tone, "Rick, what are you talking about? I can't understand a word you're saying." From his voice, she could tell he was in shock. Rick replied with a trembling voice, "Kim, Shelley is dead." Then he started crying like a child. Kim felt like the sky was about to collapse on her. "What?" she said out loud. "What are you saying? How did that happen, Rick?" Rick answered through sobs. "The police say she took her own life." Kim stood there in complete shock. "What do you mean, the police? Why are they involved?" Rick replied, "I can't explain everything on the phone. Noah and I are heading to the subway station near our place. Meet us there in 15 minutes. Before Kim could ask anything else, Rick hung up. She sat down on her bed, her face filled with fear. Kim had joined this workplace about 6 months ago. She worked as a graphic designer for a fashion magazine. Rick and Noah worked in the accounting department, and the three of them often hung out together. The night before, they had all been at Sean's house. Sean had invited almost everyone from work to the party, except Shelley. Most people at the office avoided her a bit because she had a very unsettling personality. Shelley had a crush on Sean. She had even confessed her feelings to him twice, but Sean made it clear that he was already in a relationship. Still, Shelley became obsessed with him. She kept sending him messages and trying to talk to him at work. The harassment went on for a while until Sean announced his engagement. The night before had actually been his bachelor party. After hearing about Sean's wedding plans, Shelley started acting very strangely. She stopped talking to everyone. No one had seen her at work for the past 3 to 5 days. When Kim arrived at the subway station, she saw a crowd of people gathered on the platform. Police officers were everywhere. The tracks were closed and train service had been stopped. She was still trying to understand what was happening when she saw Rick and Noah walking toward her. Their faces were pale and full of fear. She asked Rick, "Can someone please tell me what's going on here?" Rick wiped his tears and said, "It's Shelley. She jumped onto the tracks this morning." He continued, "The security cameras show there were very few people on the platform today. Since it's Sunday morning, Shelley was standing there, and when the train approached, she jumped onto the tracks." Noah added with a terrified voice, "The police called emergency services. There's blood everywhere. Her body was still down there earlier." Kim frowned. "What do you mean her body is still there? The police should have taken it already. What the hell is going on?" She started walking toward the edge of the platform. Rick tried to stop her. "No, Kim, you don't understand. But before he could finish, Kim had already reached the edge. There were bloodstains all over the platform. Then she looked farther down the tracks. She suddenly screamed at the top of her lungs and collapsed onto the platform floor. Shelley was lying on the tracks, completely torn apart. One half of her body was trapped under the train wheels, while the other half lay motionless. Kim felt sick to her stomach. Noah and Rick carried her away from the edge of the platform. She started vomiting. After a while, she managed to calm down and sat on the subway stairs. A police officer handed her a bottle of water. Paramedics eventually arrived and removed Shelley's body. When the three of them arrived back at Kim's apartment, it was almost noon. They sat on the couch in silence. None of them could believe Shelley was really gone. Finally, Noah broke the silence. "Did anyone tell Sean?" Rick replied, "I don't know. Let me call him." Kim sat there silently, her face pale and empty. Rick dialed Sean's number and told him the terrible news. Sean's reaction hit them like a punch. He said, "Listen, man, I'm not her boyfriend. I wasn't even her friend. I don't understand why everyone keeps calling me about this all morning. It's not my fault. She made those ideas up in her own head. Stop dragging me into this." Kim couldn't believe what she was hearing. She completely lost it. She grabbed the phone and said, "I can't believe you're this selfish, Sean. One of our co-workers just died a horrible death. The least you could do is show a little respect." Kim snapped angrily. "Empathy. I truly feel sorry for Shelley for falling in love with a jerk like you." Then she hung up, furious. Rick and Noah were also hurt by Sean's cruel behavior. The next day at work, Kim saw Sean in the cafeteria, laughing with co-workers as if nothing had happened. Sean noticed her, but Kim ignored him and walked away. The whole day, Kim didn't speak to Sean and completely avoided him. The office staff decorated Shelley's desk with candles. They placed a photo of her smiling, looking happy and full of life. Kim stood in front of the desk with tears in her eyes. She couldn't stop thinking that no one deserved to die in such a horrible way. After work, she was heading home when Noah asked, "Hey, are you okay?" Kim nodded slowly. "Yeah, I think so." He said, "We're thinking about going out for a drink. Do you want to come with us?" On any other day, Kim would have happily agreed, but right now, all she wanted was to go home and lie down. Kim replied in a tired voice, "No thanks. I'd better just go home and get some sleep." She left the office. Kim didn't want to take the subway, but it was the fastest way home. She checked her watch. It was already 8 in the evening. The streets were quieter because of the cold. Reluctantly, Kim headed toward the subway. As she walked down the stairs, a chilling sensation ran through her spine. She didn't know why, but she had the strange feeling that something bad was about to happen there. Again, as she walked toward the platform, fear made her start to sweat, but when she looked at the tracks, she relaxed a little. The rails looked clean. There was no sign of anything unusual. Kim sat down on one of the benches and waited for her train. There were 2 or 3 other people on the platform, but they were all waiting on the opposite side. The empty platform in front of her remained silent. A train arrived on the other side and left with the people waiting there. Now Kim was completely alone in the long subway station. She checked the schedule. She still had 10 minutes to wait. Being alone in the same station where her co-worker had died the day before was not a comforting feeling. As she tried to push away her anxious thoughts, suddenly she heard a strange sound. It sounded like something dragging across the ground, followed by another odd noise. It was hard to describe, but if she had to put it into words, it sounded like Teke, Teke. Kim didn't know what to do. Then her eyes drifted toward the edge of the platform. What the hell? She saw fingers gripping the edge of the platform from below. Before she could see more, a hand suddenly touched her shoulder, and she nearly screamed in fear. But when she turned around, she saw Sean standing there, looking surprised. Sean said with an awkward smile, "Sorry, I didn't mean to scare you. Are you okay?" Kim sighed of relief. "Don't ever do that again." Then she asked, "What are you doing here?" Sean replied, "I came to apologize for how I acted early." "Kim, you should know, I was shocked about Shelley too, but it wasn't my fault, you know. You know better than anyone how she made my life miserable. I'm not saying I'm happy she's gone, but there was nothing I could do." Kim stayed silent while Sean kept explaining that it wasn't his fault and that Shelley had serious issues. Sean was finishing his sentence, saying that Shelley should have seen a psychiatrist, when that strange sound was heard again. Sean stopped. "Did you hear that? Or is it just me?" Kim replied, confused. "No, I heard it too." They both looked toward the tracks where the sound was coming from. Sean stepped closer to the edge of the platform to see what it was. Kim followed him, but what they saw next froze them in place. Sean fell backward, and Kim pressed herself against a pillar, unable to breathe. No sound came out of her mouth. It was Shelley, or something that looked like her. Her upper body was on the tracks, her hair dark and tangled. Her mouth hung open as she slowly pulled herself up using her hands and began dragging herself toward Sean. Making a horrible sound, Sean backed away in terror and tried to stand up to run. Then, something terrifying happened right in front of Kim. Sean screamed as he suddenly collapsed to the ground. The echo of his scream filled the subway station as Kim fainted. Kim is still in the hospital. According to the news reports she heard, the subway cameras captured strange footage that night. The cameras show Kim standing against the pillar, frozen with fear, while her co-worker Sean suddenly collapses to the ground. The strangest part is that there appears to be no one else on the platform, yet Sean suddenly collapses and dies. The police have tried many times to take Kim's statement, but she hasn't spoken a single word since. She just stares at the ceiling of the hospital room, like an empty shell. The tracks never forget a grudge, but a guilty conscience is a haunt you can't escape. If you're loving the dread, smash like and subscribe to join the shadow. Now, let's find out why Alma is so afraid of the dark. Alma was sleeping in her bed. It was 3 in the morning. She poked her head out from under the blanket and looked around her room. Even with the heater on, the air in the house felt freezing. The pale moonlight made the room look even darker. Alma opened the door and stepped into the hallway. The kitchen was downstairs. She moved carefully because it was so dark. Her hands searched for the wooden railing of the staircase. Suddenly, she heard a scream. Her face turned pale instantly. Alma froze in the darkness. Yes, she had heard that sound before. When she was little, Alma lived in a wooden house with her family. One night, her mother told her a story that stayed with her for the rest of her life. Her mother said, "Once upon a time, there was a woman in a small village. She had gray hair and a very sad face. Every time she cried, someone in that village would die. The villagers believed she was cursed, so they banished her. The woman wandered alone through the dark forest. The woods terrified her, and she cried constantly. Each time she cried, a creature nearby would die. They said her name was Banshee, and her spirit still roams at night. Anyone who hears her crying will lose a loved one the next day." As she lay in bed at night, Alma often wondered if the story was real, if the Banshee truly existed. Eventually she would fall asleep, until the night she heard the Banshee crying inside their own house. That night she got up, leaving her wool blanket on the floor, and went to get some water. It was the 3rd time she had heard the crying. It sounded like someone suffering terribly, unable to stop. At first, she thought it was her small cat, but she found it sleeping peacefully on the mat. Torn between curiosity and fear, she searched through the house. The crying continued for a while, then suddenly stopped. Silence filled the house. Alma walked into the kitchen and poured herself a glass of water. Just as she was about to go back upstairs, she saw her. A woman was sitting beneath the staircase, crying. Alma was no longer afraid of the crying itself. What disturbed her was something else. When the woman cried, her eyes never blinked. She stared directly at Alma while crying and crying, but her eyes never closed. Like every night, Alma ignored her and returned to her bedroom. The next morning, when she woke up, she heard chaos in the house. Something terrible had happened. She walked down the hallway toward the sound coming from her brother's room. Inside, she saw her mother crying beside the bed. Alma stepped closer. Her brother was lying there with his eyes closed, facing the ceiling. It looked like a strange way to sleep, but her father said softly, "Don't disturb him, sweetheart. Let him sleep peacefully." Sweat formed on Alma's forehead because suddenly she remembered. Today was that day, the day from 10 years ago. Alma burst into tears as the memory returned. Her bedroom was upstairs next to her brother's room. Her parents slept downstairs in her grandmother's old room. Her grandmother had died when Alma was still a baby. Her brother hadn't even been born yet. Alma had only seen her grandmother in photographs, smiling gently while holding a white rabbit on her lap. 10 years later, Alma had never heard that cry again. Everyone was gone now. Her brother, her mother, her father. She was alone in the house. Tears streamed down her face. She believed it was all her fault. Her fault for not waking her parents that night and telling them about the crying woman. Suddenly, she heard footsteps coming from her bedroom. The woman was coming for her now. Alma ran down the dark staircase and hid beneath it. She tried not to make a sound, but the footsteps were getting closer. Someone was descending the stairs. Alma shut her eyes tightly in fear. The footsteps stopped. Slowly, she opened them again. Her eyes widened. She couldn't blink. She couldn't move. A white-haired old woman with a sorrowful face stood in the kitchen, staring directly at her. Alma's world collapsed. She was alone. The doors were locked. How had the woman entered? The ground seemed to disappear beneath her feet. The sad woman knew Alma's secret. 10 years ago, Alma had pressed a pillow over her little brother's face. After he was born, her parents loved him more than her. They bought him more toys. Even when he broke her dolls or ruined her clothes, her mother never scolded him. She had felt forgotten after her brother arrived. Back then, Alma tried to comfort herself with a terrible thought, that her brother simply needed sleep. A long sleep. We all need that kind of sleep, don't we? A release, a way to escape the sins we have committed. How many times have we wished we could start over and undo the past, but all that remains are memories, good or bad. Life showers us with countless events. Some build us, some destroy us, others leave us lost in reality. Alma's mother never recovered from the shock of losing her son in his sleep, and Alma, how happy she had once felt keeping all the toys for herself. Happy, even though it was wrong. Happy because everything had become hers again. But now the Banshee had come for her. Now it was her time. Alma slowly stood up and spoke with a broken voice. I didn't mean to kill him. I was just a child. The Banshee began walking towards her slowly, pointing directly at her. Her finger never moved. Alma continued speaking with a trembling voice. Please, let me go. I was just a child. I thought that pressing the pillow hard would make him hide and sleep for a few days. But I didn't know he would never wake up. Please, let me go. It's been 10 years now. Why do you haunt me like this every year on this date? Why can't you just leave me alone? But the Banshee continued moving toward her. She got very close to Alma. Alma could see her clouded eyes, full of pain. Then the Banshee opened her dark mouth and let out a terrifying scream. Alma was shaken by the sight and fainted to the ground. The next morning, she woke up lying in a hospital bed. She didn't know if it had been a dream or reality. Her neighbor had come by that morning, and when Alma didn't answer, Mrs. Sherman called the police, and they brought her to the hospital. Mrs. Sherman was at the hospital when the doctor came and asked, "Does she often have panic attacks like this?" Mrs. Sherman replied sadly, "Not always, but every January, on this day, she screams and becomes completely different. Once I stayed with her, and she talked about a nightmare involving a white-haired woman. I don't know why she kept repeating that she hadn't killed her brother." The doctor, surprised, asked, "What happened to her brother?" Mrs. Sherman replied, "Don't ask. Alma has been through a lot. It seems her family has a history of heart issues. She was very young when her brother died of a heart attack. Then her mother and father also passed away in their old age. Please take care of her, doctor. She needs help." The doctor nodded and promised to do his best. Alma was admitted to a psychiatric hospital for better care. Now she sits by a window, lost in sorrow. Sometimes she looks at her hands and thinks about the 3 lives she ended and the suffering they endured. But she doesn't understand why she's still alive. Did the Banshee leave her to suffer forever? You probably know the reality show Big Brother. Every year there's a new season with new celebrities. There are many adaptations in different languages. This is the story of Richard, who worked on the production team of Big Brother in 2018. His job was to install cameras in the Big Brother house and make sure everything was working properly. The team's work started several months before the show. Richard was ready to leave for Los Angeles, where the show would take place. He packed his bags and called the supplier to bring the equipment and staff. He got in his car and drove to the Big Brother set. After an hour and a half, he finally saw the big gate of the Big Brother house. He drove through the gate and parked on the right side. The production director, James, was at the gate, talking with the supplier. He had a shark-like, mean-looking face and was known for flirting with female colleagues on set. Richard stood there. Suddenly, Smith approached him and asked, "So, what do you think of this place?" Smith was the security guard. Richard smiled and said, "It's a big house. Surprising he didn't choose this place before." Smith looked around and whispered, "Meet me at noon. I'll explain why." Then he walked toward the gate. Richard wondered, why is Smith suddenly being mysterious? Finally, he went to the control room to check the camera installations. The control room had 3 large flat screens showing every room in the house. Richard grabbed the nearest chair and started checking each camera connection. The show would start in a month, so the house was completely empty for now. The supplier came over, and they discussed other technical work. Richard stepped out for a break around 6 p.m. When he left the studio, he realized almost everyone had gone. Richard was used to staying late on set. His job was to manage all the technical support and ensure everything ran smoothly during filming. He lit a cigarette and noticed a small room near the gate. Smith lived there. Richard stood there, smoking, alone. Suddenly, something crossed his mind. He remembered that Smith had said, "Meet me at noon. I'll explain why." He decided to go see him and talk a bit. Richard walked toward the small room. The place was so quiet that he could hear every step. When he got close, he saw Smith stirring his tea. Smith gave a big smile and said, "Sit down, please." Richard sat and began discussing the work. He asked, "What were you talking about this afternoon?" Smith's face suddenly turned serious. He said, It's just a scary story, but maybe I shouldn't tell you, since you will be staying here tonight, alone in the studio. Richard realized Smith was teasing him. He insisted, and Smith finally agreed to tell the story. Last month, the Big Brother team renovated the house for the current season. Before that, the place had been abandoned for 5 or 6 years. The guard who worked here before told me a scary story about this place. He said that years ago, auditions and small film shoots used to take place here. There was a beautiful girl named Kathy who had come for an audition. James was the assistant manager at the time. He already had a reputation for flirting with women at work. He promised Kathy a major role in the film and trapped her with sweet words. They were seen together on set all the time, but at some point, James became interested in another girl. He dumped Kathy and told her to get out. One evening, James was working late at the studio when Kathy came to talk to him. The guard knew her and liked her for her politeness, so he let her in. She went into James's room and started crying over his betrayal. They had a terrible argument. The next morning, the guard found her lifeless body floating in the pool behind the studio. People said she had committed suicide out of heartbreak. James had good connections, so he faced no consequences. Richard asked, "That's sad, but what's so scary about it?" Smith pointed to the house. "Many have seen a woman floating upside down in that pool. At first, they thought it was a body, but when they returned with others, there was no one there. Many believe her ghost still haunts the place." Richard laughed. "Those are just rumors, Smith. I've worked late alone on many sets. Ghosts don't exist. You'll have to do better than that if you want to scare me." Smith smiled silently. Richard checked his watch. "It's 8 p.m. I need to get back to work, but call me if you see any ghosts," he said, and left laughing. Entering the studio, he saw the hallway empty at the end. A huge glass wall overlooked the pool. There was no one by the pool, which was also very dirty. Richard told the supplier to send people tomorrow to clean it. He went into his room and sat in his chair. Every part of the house was in view. He decided to review the footage from the past few hours to check the cameras. In Big Brother, these cameras are essential tools. He launched the past footage and began scrolling. Kitchen, okay. Bathroom, okay. Garden, okay. But as he moved to the pool footage, a chill ran down his spine. Who was that girl by the pool? He fast-forwarded and saw that she had been there almost an hour before suddenly disappearing. Sweat appeared on his forehead. He thought, was Smith telling the truth? Is this place really haunted by the ghost of a woman? He quickly closed the old footage and opened the live camera by the pool. No one was there. Is Smith trying to play a stupid joke on me? Then he heard a terrifying scream and froze in front of the screen. A woman was in the pool, floating upside down. Richard couldn't believe his eyes. He ran to the glass wall in the hallway. What he saw gave him goosebumps. There was a woman floating in the pool, lifeless. "Oh my God," he whispered, terrified. Suddenly, the woman raised her face. Richard had never seen such a frightening face. Her skin was pale and decayed, her wide eyes nearly bulging from their sockets. She looked at Richard and opened her mouth. From the dark hollow of her mouth, maggots began crawling out. Richard fell to the ground in terror. He wanted to scream, but no sound came out. The woman stood and slowly walked toward the glass wall. She was now right in front of Richard. The glass was the only thing between them. Her nails hung from decayed fingers. She looked extremely terrifying. Her hair and clothes were soaked. She stared at him and then started laughing. Her voice was horrifying. Richard feared the glass would shatter. He got up and ran toward the door to save his life. As soon as he exited, he ran frantically to Smith's room. Smith was shocked to see Richard in complete panic. Before he could understand what happened, Richard fainted on the floor. Richard was admitted to the hospital. He stayed for a week with a high fever. He never returned to the Big Brother set. He terminated his contract, citing fragile health. Smith came to visit him at the hospital, but Richard didn't speak a word. Who would believe Richard? Everyone would think he had lost his mind after a scary story and made it all up. To this day, Richard has nightmares of standing by the glass with that terrifying woman staring at him, and laughed like a mad woman.